Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some people seem to pick things up super fast while others need to really zoom in on the tiny details? Well, this new study dives into how we learn and categorize things, and why focusing on the little things can sometimes actually slow us down. Imagine you're learning about a new kind of bird. You could try to get a general feel for it, maybe its average size and color, or you could focus on every single feather and scratch on its leg. This research explores exactly that. Are we better off seeing the big picture or getting lost in the details when we learn? So the scientists wanted to figure out why some people learn by looking at the overall characteristics of things like a mental average, which is called prototype theory, and why others learn by remembering every single example they've ever seen, which is called exemplar theory. They thought that how we pay attention, whether we focus broadly or narrowly, might be the key. They also looked at traits related to autism and how people think analytically versus holistically. Think about sorting your mail. You might quickly sort bills versus junk mail just by glancing at the envelopes. That is like seeing the forest for the trees. Or you might meticulously examine the return address, the font, and the paper quality to make sure it is not something important. That is like looking at every single tree. This is the core idea here. In the first study, they had people play a video game where they had to learn to sort cartoon fish into two categories. While they were playing the game, they also did a different task where they had to identify big letters made of smaller letters, either focusing on the big letter or the small ones. This measured how well they could process things globally or locally. They also filled out questionnaires about autistic traits and their thinking style. This Navon task is really cool. You see a big shape like an H made out of smaller H's. They asked people to identify either the big H or the small h. This helps measure if you tend to see the big picture or the tiny details first. Okay, so what did they find in study 1? They found that people who were faster at identifying the global patterns in the Navon task were a little better at learning categories using the big picture or prototype approach. It is like being good at seeing the forest helps you create a general idea of what these categories are. However, the connections weren't super strong, so they did a second study. In study 2, they tried to directly influence people as focus. They used that Navon task to prime people either globally or locally. So some people were told to focus on the big letters and others to focus on the small letters before they started learning the fish categories. This is where it gets really interesting. Even though priming people globally or locally didn't drastically change which strategy they used, whether prototype or exemplar, they found something really cool in how people actually paid attention to the features of the fish. When people were primed to focus on the details locally, and they were also using the remember every example or exemplar strategy, they tended to pay attention more to features that actually didn't help much in sorting the fish. It is like they were getting bogged down in irrelevant details. This slowed them down and made their learning less efficient. It suggests that focusing too much on the devil in the details can actually lead to suboptimal learning. So what does this all mean? It seems that our natural tendency to focus globally or locally can influence how we approach learning categories. While focusing on details isn't always bad, it can be particularly unhelpful when you're trying to learn categories and you lean towards remembering every single example. In those cases, getting lost in the weeds can make it harder to learn effectively. Now, it is important to mention some limitations. The Navon task, while useful, has sometimes been criticized for not being perfectly reliable, so maybe they use other ways to measure this in the future. Also, the category learning task itself was quite difficult. These researchers mentioned that people often struggle to reach a high level of learning. This means the results might change with an easier task. And they also noted that in study 1, they had more female participants than male participants. And since autistic traits are more common in males, this might have affected their findings on autistic traits. Ultimately, this study tells us that how we attend to information global versus local matters. It doesn't just affect how we see things in the moment, but also how we learn and form our understanding of the world. For some people, focusing too much on the fine points can actually be a hindrance to efficient learning. It is a great reminder that sometimes seeing the forest for the trees is the best way to learn. What do you think about this research? Do you tend to focus on the big picture or the details? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this dive into cognitive psychology, be sure to like this video and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating insights into the human mind. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.